Welcome back to Ancient Edge, where the dust of forgotten history reveals truths more powerful than myth. Now, just close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself not in the comfort of your home, but crouched in a muddy foxhole somewhere in the Pacific Theatre, 1943. The air reeks of cordite and fear. Your supplies are gone. Your radio is dead. The enemy is close enough that you can hear their voices through the darkness. In this moment, no amount of training manuals or standard-issue equipment will save you. What keeps you alive is something far more primal, far more ingenious, the kind of battlefield wisdom that transforms ordinary men into masters of survival. Tricks so effective that military command often kept them classified, worried that widespread knowledge might reveal tactical advantages, or, perhaps more cynically, that the brutal reality of improvisation might undermine morale on the home front. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on 10 survival techniques that emerged from the crucible of World War II, methods that soldiers whispered about in trenches and demonstrated to one another when officers weren't watching. These weren't the sanitized techniques printed in field manuals. These were the raw, desperate, brilliant innovations born when death was the only alternative to creativity. And here's what makes this knowledge truly extraordinary. Every single one of these techniques remains devastatingly relevant in our modern world, whether you're facing a natural disaster, lost in the wilderness, or simply committed to genuine preparedness in an increasingly uncertain age. The unseen arsenal. Tools hidden in plain sight. The first trick sounds almost absurdly simple until you understand its applications. Soldiers discovered that a standard makeup mirror, the kind tucked into their sweetheart's letters from home, could become a life-saving multi-tool. In the dense jungles of the South Pacific or the North African desert, this small reflective surface could concentrate sunlight with surgical precision onto a bundle of dry tinder, creating fire when matches were soaked through or simply gone. But fire starting was only the beginning. That same mirror became a signaling device capable of flashing messages across miles of terrain, a silent scream for help that could reach rescue aircraft when voice and radio had failed. The elegant simplicity of this technique speaks to a broader survival principle. The most powerful tools aren't necessarily the most complex. They're the ones that serve multiple critical functions while taking up almost no space and requiring no fuel, no batteries, no infrastructure. Equally ingenious was the discovery that a high-carbon steel machete or knife, when struck at the correct angle against a hard piece of flint or quartzite, could shower sparks onto carefully prepared char cloth. Fabric that had been partially burned to create an ember-catching material that soldiers learned to manufacture from their own uniforms if necessary. This method of fire-starting predated modern warfare by millennia, yet it proved more reliable than matches in wet conditions and more renewable than lighters with finite fuel. Veterans of the European theatre, fighting through endless rain and snow, mastered this technique out of desperate necessity. The psychological impact of being able to create fire, to transform cold and darkness into warmth and light through nothing but skill and determination, cannot be overstated. Fire meant survival. It meant hot food, dry clothes, purified water, and the all-important maintenance of morale in conditions designed to break the human spirit. Medical miracles. Healing without a hospital. Perhaps nowhere was improvisation more critical than in emergency medicine. The standard cotton triangular bandage, known as a cravat, became legendary among medics for its versatility. This simple piece of cloth could immobilize a broken limb as a sling, apply direct pressure to stop arterial bleeding, serve as a tourniquet when death from blood loss was seconds away, strain contaminated water to remove visible particles, or even be charred over a fire to create that precious char cloth for fire starting. Combat medics became virtuosos of adaptation, often performing life-saving interventions with nothing but this cloth and their knowledge of human anatomy. The key insight here transcends the specific tool. Understanding the fundamental principles of what a body needs to survive, stopped bleeding, immobilized fractures, protected wounds, allows you to improvise solutions from whatever materials exist in your environment. The military also pioneered the concept of ultra-compact medical kits, developing combat shears small enough to fit into palm-sized first aid pouches, while remaining capable of cutting through clothing, webbing, or even thin metal. This philosophy of aggressive minimization, of identifying the absolute essential tools and ruthlessly eliminating everything else, became a survival imperative when every ounce of carried weight could mean the difference between reaching cover or collapsing in the open. Modern preppers and wilderness enthusiasts often make the opposite mistake, accumulating vast quantities of specialized gear when what they truly need is deep knowledge of how to maximize the utility of a few carefully chosen items. Survival in combat often meant never being seen in the first place. Soldiers learned through costly mistakes that silhouetting themselves against the skyline by cresting a hill was often fatal. The technique of moving along the side of terrain features rather than over the top became instinctive for veterans, a lesson written in the blood of those who learned too slowly. This awareness of how your profile appears against the background environment applies far beyond military contexts. Whether you're trying to observe wildlife, avoid dangerous individuals in an urban emergency, or simply move through space without drawing attention, understanding sight lines and background contrast is fundamental tradecraft. Even more ingenious was the practice of writing critical information on leaves rather than paper. A soldier could jot down map coordinates, rendezvous times, or enemy positions on a broad leaf, memorize the information, then, crumble and discard the leaf, leaving no documentary evidence for enemy intelligence if captured. This technique really exemplified operational security taken to its logical extreme, the understanding that in certain contexts, even possessing written information could be more dangerous than relying on memory alone. The disposable nature of leaves made them perfect for temporary records that needed to vanish without trace. The Swedish Mylar emergency blanket represented another leap in multifunction survival tools. With one side metallized orange for maximum visibility and the other a subdued green, soldiers could choose whether to signal for rescue or remain concealed, all while reflecting their own body heat back toward them to prevent hypothermia. This reversible design perfectly embodied the dual nature of survival situations. Sometimes you desperately want to be found, and sometimes being invisible means staying alive. Understanding when to signal and when to hide requires situational awareness that, honestly, no amount of equipment can replace. One of the most overlooked survival skills is the ability to keep your equipment organized and immediately accessible. Combat veterans learn to coil tubular nylon webbing in specific patterns and secure it with a carabiner, creating compact bundles that could be deployed instantly without tangles. This webbing could become an improvised stretcher to carry wounded comrades, a harness for rappelling down cliffs, cordage for securing shelters, or even emergency restraints. The critical insight is that having equipment means nothing if you cannot access it quickly when seconds matter. Many survival situations are lost, not because people lack tools, but because those tools were buried at the bottom of an overstuffed pack or hopelessly tangled when urgency demanded immediate use. Underlying every physical technique was perhaps the most powerful survival tool of all, the trained mind. Soldiers who survived the most horrific conditions shared a common trait. They maintained purpose and hope even when objective circumstances suggested hopelessness. This wasn't naive optimism, but rather a deliberate psychological discipline, the ability to break overwhelming situations into manageable tasks and focus on the immediate action within their control. building a shelter from branches and leaves in a freezing rainstorm, purifying water by straining it through cloth and exposing it to sunlight, creating improvised snares from bootlaces to catch food. Each small victory against the environment reinforced the will to continue, the belief that human ingenuity could overcome circumstance. These techniques aren't museum pieces. In our current era of climate instability, infrastructure vulnerability, and geopolitical uncertainty, the skills that kept soldiers alive 80 years ago remain powerfully relevant. A makeup mirror in your emergency kit weighs nothing and could signal rescue aircraft if you're stranded after a vehicle breakdown in remote areas. Understanding how to create fire from steel and stone means you're never completely dependent on manufactured fire-starting tools that can fail or run out. A simple cotton bandana becomes a multi-tool for water filtration, wound care, or sun protection. The habit of staying aware of your profile and background when moving through space has obvious applications for personal security in urban environments. Perhaps most importantly, these historical lessons teach us that survival isn't primarily about accumulating equipment. It's about developing versatile knowledge, maintaining psychological resilience, and cultivating the ability to see potential in ordinary objects. The soldiers who mastered these techniques didn't survive because they had the best gear. They survived because they understood principles, because they could adapt, because they refused to surrender to circumstances. So here's your mission. Should you choose to accept it, pick one of these techniques and actually practice it this week. Learn to start a fire with steel and flint. Practice straining water through cloth coil, some cordage properly. Transform knowledge from abstract information into embodied skill, because that transformation is what separates those who survive from those who merely hoped they would. Share this video with someone who values preparedness and self-reliance. Subscribe to Ancient Edge, where we continue unearthing the hidden knowledge of the past that remains essential for the future. And tell us in the comments which of these World War II survival tricks surprised you most, or which one will you be adding to your personal skill set? The enduring human capacity to adapt, to innovate under pressure, to survive against all odds. This is our inheritance from those who came before. Honor it by being prepared. We'll see you in the next one.